Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome in. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Shielding Justice, Navigating Cybersecurity Challenges in Law Firms. We are more than thrilled to have with us our special guest and speaker, Wilson Joseph, who will be leading this seminar. But before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself and our department and remind you about your best member benefit. My name is Nkoyo Effiong-Lewis, and I am the Director of Law Practice Management Program. I've had the privilege of sitting in this seat for the last 3 years, and I'm excited to bring to you more resources. If this is your first time joining us and joining a law practice management program, welcome. We want to make sure that you know who and what the Law Practice Management Program does. We are your member benefit, as I mentioned, and we exist as the only department of the bar that is here to primarily assist you with starting, scaling, or shutting down your law practice. And we like to say doing that with less stress. And that means that we leverage processes, systems, and technology to make sure that you get the resources that you need to run a modern law practice and not have your practice run you. And so today's CLE is really focused on one of our core components of running a modern law practice, which is managing that cybersecurity and technology piece. And so in a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Wilson, who I had the privilege of meeting at a business conference. And so I'm really excited for him to share with you all here. I know there are going to be questions about how you get your CLE credit and all of those things. And so I want to sort of provide you some guidance on what that looks like. The best way to get your credit is to be here and online the entire duration of the time. We do have to make sure that you get that 1 hour credit, that you have been here the entire time. And then our department will handle getting that information to those people who have been here for the amount of time necessary to be eligible for the credit to the CLE department. I believe then you'll have to pay a nominal fee, but otherwise all of the how do I get my credit? How do I make sure that I'm here? All you need to do is be here, active and attending on this CLE, and we will handle the rest. Kim, if I've left anything out, let me know in the chat so I can make sure I say it to everyone. But without further ado, I do want to turn it over to Wilson Joseph. And I have a great story about how I met Wilson. Like I mentioned, we were at a business conference and he was talking about, everyone was talking about how exciting AI and all these great things. And he sort of brought the counterpoint about our cybersecurity and how we manage that and how we do that, particularly as regulated professionals like lawyers. And he had a book. And so I was like, I need that book. And Wilson went to go get the book from the car. And like by the time he came back, I think he was bombarded by every single attorney who was present and didn't have the book to provide for me, but has been a great resource to our department, helping us to improve some of our resources that we have for you. And so, Wilson, we always just thank you and appreciate you being willing to engage with us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Antonio. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilson Joseph. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. Share screen number 2. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Again, thank you so much for having me. My name is Wilson Joseph. I am the CEO of Level 3 MD, and I have been in the industry for about 20 plus years now. There we go. I am a little bit about me. I am a husband. I am a father. I am an author as well. And I have 20 plus years in experience in the field of IT and cybersecurity. The 3 words that I like to think of myself is empower, protect, and transform. Basically, what I do, I empower businesses to protect sensitive data and transforming operations through tailored IT and cybersecurity solutions. I know this is not about me. We have a lot of content to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right into it. But before I do so, I do have a quick disclaimer that I like to share. Obviously, this is for educational purpose only, and this should not be considered as legal advice. If you do need legal advice when it comes to data privacy laws, I would suggest you consult with an attorney in that area. Quick introduction of what we're going to cover. Again, we have quite a bit that we're going to cover. We'll discuss a bit introduction, why cybersecurity matters, and we'll go over a few things when it comes to cyber risk management. And I'll discuss the top 5 risks that we see law firms are facing today and potential solutions, as well as creating a plan, providing a plan on how you can manage those risks proactively. And after my presentation, if you say, hey, this is too much for you to cover during the Q&A session, I will have an offer for you, invite you to partner with us where we can help you manage your risks. Again, as lawyers and law firms, safeguarding client-sensitive data is crucial. So in this presentation, I will cover the top 5 common threats that we see law firms faces today. And before I get to it, a lot of people ask me, what is cybersecurity? So I would like to take a minute to explain what is cybersecurity and the core objectives of cybersecurity. All right. Cybersecurity is based on 3 core principles. The first one, we usually call it the famous CIA triad. The first one is confidentiality. Second is integrity. The third one is availability. So for confidentiality is that ensuring sensitive information is accessible to only authorized users or individuals or systems. Perfect example for that would be encrypting client's record to prevent unauthorized access. And integrity is the practice of protecting data from being altered or tampered by unauthorized party. A clear example for this would be preventing any malicious actors from modify financial records. I wish I could modify my financial records and put a few zeros behind it. But that's what integrity is about, is making sure that the integrity of your data stays intact. And the third, but not least, is availability. Availability is also designed to make sure your systems are available when it's needed. An example for that is maintaining uptimes for maybe a cloud-based law management software. A little bit about the landscape. This report that I got from the American Bar Association, it was the 2022 report. Based on the industry, they've seen the average law firms, 25% of the average law firm has experienced an attack in the past year. And over a year, that number grows by 15% annually. And again, that happens with some of the common threats that we will discuss. We're talking about from phishing, ransomware, business email compromise, and as well as data breach. Now, why cybersecurity matters? Well, cybersecurity is just not an IT thing anymore. It's a necessity for law firms, and the ethical aspects of it make it a critical component for you to manage your practice, as well as maintain regulatory compliance and protect your client's relationship. In the next slide, I'll cover the 4 key components why this is truly matters, as I mentioned, is that you have an ethical duty as lawyers to protect your client sensitive information. There's also regulatory compliance when it comes to data privacy laws that dictate that information is secure. Obviously, you have your client-attorney privilege, which is the foundational of the legal profession, and as well as business disruption. I don't know if any one of you remember, Fulton County last year, I believe, experienced a hack, and they were down for days. People were not able to conduct business for days. So that would consider what we call a business disruption. Now, as we move forward, I always like to ask this: how would a cybersecurity incident impact you personally? All right. Would your client sensitive information get compromised? How would that impact your relationship with your clients? Would you have to pay any fines or any lawsuits when it comes to a cyber attack? How would you demonstrate trust with your current and future clients? I know a lot of law firms have cybersecurity liability. Would your cybersecurity liability pay a claim if you were to have an incident? And as well, the last one that I like to ask, would a breach impact your ability to practice law? So this one, I got it from the State Bar's website. It talks about, lawyers should make reasonable effort to prevent client-sensitive information. I'm not going to go too much into that, but it is a part of your ethical duty to do so. Now, knowing all this information, I'd like to move over and talk about the 5 principles when it comes to cyber risk management. The 5 basic principles when it comes to cyber risk management are, when you think about risks, what does that mean to you? So again, as I mentioned, cyber risk is more than an IT problem. It's a strategic risk. Imagine as lawyers that the opposite counsel have your strategy to try a case, right? So everything that you're gonna say, that's gonna be undermined because they already know your next move. So that would be a strategic risks, along some other business risks when it comes to intellectual properties that may be compromising, things of that nature, right? As far as reputational risks, the damage that comes to your reputation if you get a hack, that it needs to be disclosed, you have to notify your clients, so forth and so on. And it comes also financial risk, it comes a compliant risk, as well as legal risk. I mean, there's a lot on this risks, so I think I'm not gonna cover each and every single bullet here, but I hope you get the picture, right? Cyber risk is more than just an IT problem. It is a business risk problem. Now, let's talk about how to identify your risks. So the first things that you want to do when it comes to risk management is what I call risk identification. Basically, you have to understand what are the risks that you have, and you need to conduct a risk assessment to see if something were to happen, what would be the worst case scenario. So that's the first step, which is the risk identification. The next piece is conducting what I call a risk analysis. The information that you gathered from the risk assessment, now you need to determine how often would this risk occur, or how severe would it happen when it happened. So that would be a risk analysis. And based on that, you can take proper measures to manage your risk proactively. The third part of the risk management is the risk control. This is the biggest one. So once you identify all the different risks that you have in your environment, now you're going to have some decisions to make. You can either avoid the risks, you can prevent the risk, you can reduce the risk, you can transfer it, or you can accept it. But you have to make a decision. So one example of risk avoidance, you can choose not to own a law firm. You say, hey, I don't want to deal with that risk. I'm just going to work for another law firm and I just don't want to own the law firms. And then you avoid the risk altogether, right? The second piece would be the risk prevention. Risk prevention is pretty much aimed to reduce or the likelihood of some of a loss, right? So in this case, what you want to do here, you might want to implement reasonable security measures, processes, and procedures to meet regulatory compliance and also meet your client's expectations and your ethical duties. So that would be a risk prevention. The third part of the risk control would be a risk reduction. Now, if something were to happen, how do you minimize your blast radius? Meaning, so an example for this, if you detect some sort of cyber incident, just unplug everything from the network, disconnect from the network to contain that risk to just that device that was impacted, right? And the next thing is the risk transfer. Risk transfer is pretty much what it sounds, right? In our industries, there are two types of risk transfers. It's either you work with a service provider that can help you implement these things, or you have a cybersecurity liability insurance that you transfer the risk to that insurance service provider. And the last part of the risk control here would be the risk acceptance. Risk acceptance is a strategy that used by organization to either accept the risk where instead of trying to reduce it or eliminate it. So I have here that says unmanaged security is risk acceptance. You know, that's what it is. You have to make a decision, right? And I want to have all these things in place. Now, let's talk about what I call risk financing, right? So risk financing is the concept of any financial loss that you have to pay out where your security controls or technique did not prevent, right? So a clear example for this. So let's say you have cyber security policy, and you have to file a claim, which I'll get into in a little bit, and you have a deductible, right? So that deductible, after a claim satisfies the claim, you have to pay your deductible. So that would be a part of risk financing. Again, obviously, this one is self-explanatory, the claim management. When a loss occurred, you file a claim and you go through the process. Now, knowing all these, let's talk about the 5 common threats that we see in the industries. And here we'll provide you with some guidance on some of the tools that you can use to help mitigate those risks. The first one that we see in our industry is what I call phishing attacks. Phishing attacks is when an attacker sent you a fraudulent email pretending that they are coming from a reputable source. I remember last year I had a few clients who actually reached out to me because they were getting a fake email from the State Bar of Georgia, where they had to send an email notification that says, "Hey, these are fraudulent. You should delete it automatically." So they using the State Bar as a trusted entity to get you to do something. So I always say, does the cyber criminals know who you are? Yes, they do, because majority of your information is publicly accessible. It's in different directories, different associations, and things of that nature. So the hackers knows how to get to you, and they knows how to create very compelling messages. So now, how to prevent a phishing attack? So I have some bullet points here that you can look. The first, this one's always going to be first, educating your staff, educating your employees to recognize what a fake email looks like. And the second is always going to be use professional email services. By using a professional email services, you can do what we call email filtering. You can add additional layers of security protection when you have a professional email services. If you're using a public emails like Yahoo or Gmails or things of that nature, you're really leaving it up to the service provider to take over that control for you. And it's a free service. Obviously, the level of investment they're going to have to make to do that, it just doesn't make sense, right? And and using an AI powered filter spam protection, and you always want to scan the dark web to see if your information is in the dark web. If it is, if your password is in the dark web, what you want to do is make sure you change your password. Have a threat detection, what we call threat detection and response in your system, right? And also have an alert system where you can alert on these types of behaviors. The next one is ransomware. Ransomware, what it is, it's a malicious file that get installed into your system and then encrypt your entire computer and asking you to pay a ransom in order for you to have access back to your data. The way to prevent this is by having data backups regularly. Ideally, the way you want to back up your information, you want that information to be backup off site, where in the event if your local network gets impacted, that backup is stored somewhere securely. And the next is you always want to do security assessments. Wherever it's applicable, you want to have multi-factor authentication enabled. Um, and you always want to look at different threat detection that you can have in place. And again, cybersecurity is very simple. As you are going to see in my presentation, majority of the things that I'm going to be talking about is going to be very repetitive. It's going to be extremely repetitive because it's the same layers that prevent many, many, many different types of data breach or things of that nature. The third risk that we see and it's insider threats. Now, why this is a big risk? Because insiders, they're already a trusted entity or a trusted individual. So they already have access to your information, right? Insider threats could be a current or a former employees that misuse data or have access or have some malicious intent to to take that information maybe to the next competitor, right? Or maybe they're not trained properly where they release that information without knowing that they release it, right? And some preventions that you can have on place for this is backups. Again, you want to have what I call conditional access. Only grant employees access to information that they need to perform in the roles, right? You don't want to give them access to everything. You want to make sure you limit the access on a need to know basis. If they don't need admin rights to conduct the daily activities or the daily work duties, you reduce those access. Again, you always want to have a spam filter in place. You want to have some network security gateways. You want to have make sure your computers are patched and up to date. You want to have any point of communication when it comes to your mobile devices. You want to have some sort of security controls on your mobile devices as well. And when everything fails, as I mentioned, cybersecurity insurance is going to be your next best thing. And the fourth one that we see is going to be malware. Malware are designed to damage your system or disable your system or network to steal sensitive information. Again, it's very repetitive when it comes on the things that you need to do is making sure that you have the proper backups, making sure that we have something what we call what is your acceptable recovery times objective. So if you were down, what is the amount of hours that you want to be down? So that would be your acceptable recovery time objectives. If it's 2 hours, then you want to make sure you're backing up your information every 2 hours, right? If it's 5 hours, you want to make sure you're backing up your information every 5 hours. And again, where it's applicable, use multi-factor authentication. 99% of cybersecurity breaches can be avoided if you have multi-factor authentication in place. That was a study that was done by Microsoft many, many, many years ago. And until today, it still stands true, right? Not to go over every single one of the list because, like I said, it's very repetitive. Um, the The fifth and final ones are vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are just weaknesses in your systems or network that cyber criminals can exploit to either harm or cause some sort of business outage. And the best way to prevent vulnerabilities is by doing risk assessments and making sure all your systems are patched and making sure you have the proper layers of cyber security tools to not only to identify, but also to respond to those threats. And for the next uh, part of my presentation here is what I call what security programs for law firms would look like. Okay, so in here, the objective is really, really simple. So what you want to do here is making sure that your client sensitive data are protected. You make sure you want to reduce your cyber risk surface, and you want to make sure you're compliant with regulatory mandates as well as maintain your firm's reputation. With the frameworks that I'm about to discuss, it really came from based on the NIST cybersecurity framework that aligns of not only identifying, protecting, and detecting, responding, and recover from a cyber attack. Now, the first part of this framework is going to be around what we call governance and risk management. And the first thing that you want to do is making sure that you have the proper cybersecurity policies and procedures in place. One of the big things that we see a lot of people not doing is having what we call an acceptable use policy. An acceptable use policy really dictates what a user can do on a company-owned device. Should they allowed to go to gaming sites that usually have a lot of malwares, or should they allowed to go to any sites that's not business related or social media? You want to have a policy that dictates what each and every employees can do. The next one is you have to have an incident response in play, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's a matter of when you're gonna have an attack, right? And when you do, you want to have a clear way of making sure that you have a process to communicate internally, you have a process to communicate externally, you have a process to notify law enforcement if necessary. And you always want to have what I call a data classification policy, right? Data classification policies, usually you'll have some that says, okay, it's publicly information or publicly classified. That means everybody can have access to it. Or it could be internal, it's only for internal use only. Or you could have one that it says is confidential. And confidential usually policies or that data usually needs to be accessed on a need-to-know basis only. And obviously now we're in a world where we have a lot of remote workers and there's a hybrid work environment now. You want to have what we call a BYOD policy, which is bring your own device policy, and as well as a remote work policy as well. And again, the next thing, you also want to have a vendor risk management policy, meaning that you have to hold your vendors accountable if they have access to your sensitive information of what some security measures they need to have in place. Because at the end of the day, you are reliable, regardless where your information goes, who has access to it. At the end of the day, you are responsible for protecting your clients' sensitive information. The next part, as I mentioned, is conducting a risk assessment. Conducting a detailed risk assessment to identify the level of threats and vulnerabilities that you have in your environment is going to be crucial. At the end of the day, we cannot manage what we don't know. So you have to have the visibility that you need to say, hey, maybe we can't do this quarter, but we're gonna plan for it to do it next quarter. But meanwhile, since it is a risk, how we can reduce the surface? How can we, a lot of times we'll have exercise with our clients where, hey, we identified this risk. I know this is not in the budget right now. Is it possible we can remove this system from the network and only access it internally? So these are some of the things that you need to think about so you can strategize on some of the risks that are out there where you can minimize it. And you want to have a tool that scans for vulnerability. Again, cybersecurity is not reactive. It should be proactive. You want to have tools that scan your network constantly. And also when you have those risks, you have somewhere where you can register those risks and then kind of work through them accordingly based on your needs and budget. Again, the other ones that are part of the risk government management is compliance regulatory compliance. What are the risks that you think that you have to face, right? I have a lot of clients that actually that works with consumers in New York. They still have to comply with the New York Shield. Although they run a law firm here in Atlanta, if they're working with residents in New York, they have to comply with those laws as well. So understand all the different regulatory compliance that applies to you and your law firm based on the area of practice. So for example, if you work with customers in the medical field, maybe HIPAA is something that you need to worry about. If you work with your clients, as I mentioned in California, maybe the California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA, is something that you need to know and what are the requirements. And same thing if you work with clients in New York, you have to understand what are the mandates from those regulatory compliance as well from New York. And the second part, now we identify all the different risks. Now let's put some controls in place. All right. The first network one is your network security. Having an advanced threat protection or firewall in your system is going to be crucial here. And also use what we call Secured Access Service Edge, SASE. It's a way that you can control your remote workers, right? You give them a specific network and it's actually encrypt your data from end to end. Although if they are working remotely, sometimes a lot of times the home network doesn't have.
Before all the other treatments makes survival better, you become static.
Thank you. Yep. So yeah, so a lot of times your home network will not have the necessary protection that you need. So that's where a SASE solution come in place to help your remote your remote workers access your data securely. And security, endpoint security protection, you want to make sure all your devices have what we call imprint detection and response tool that can respond to threats in real time. Now, in the world of AI, we have a lot of AI-based incident endpoint detection and response solutions that's not only looking at the behavior of the systems, but it's also looking at the likelihood of what a potential threat may looks like. And after that, for endpoint security, you want to ensure all of your systems are encrypted. Your laptops, smartphones, any portable drive that you use, it's encrypted, right? So I had a client who went to the airport. By going to the airport, he left his laptop in the car, right? And the laptop was stolen. Um, Again, if that laptop was not encrypted, anybody could just take the hard drive out of that laptop and insert it into another computer and pull every single information from that system. It is that simple. But once your system is encrypted, that hard drive is no longer used without the proper key of the encryption key. The third piece for security control, you want to make sure you have a good email security solution. So you want to make sure you have a secure email gateway that filters your emails so the junk emails can go to junk, and anything that looks potentially malicious can be deleted or quarantined. Again, when it's possible, always enable multi-factor authentication for all of your email accounts. And let's talk about data security now. You want to implement what we call data loss prevention. In the event that you share something by accident, you want to be able to recall that data. All right, so that's what a data loss prevention will do. Or, for example, if you collaborating with another attorney, you get them access to a data, and then this sort of engagement is done. You want to be able to recall that information. You can just grant them privilege to that data, but have a way to revoke that privilege at any time you feel like that engagement is no longer or needed. Again, you want to encrypt all of your clients' communication, either in transit or at rest. That information needs to be encrypted. The next that you want to have is cloud security. You want to make sure that you are monitored for the things that you have in your cloud environment. You'd be surprised how many people that says, you know what, I don't need to worry about cybersecurity because my information is in the cloud. Yes, you do. Although your information is in the cloud, you have the cloud model based on a responsible model that the consumer have their own responsibility to protect their information, and also the service provider have their own responsibility to protect the network layer. But it is your responsibility to protect the information that you have in the cloud by making sure you have the proper identity and access management things in place, and by making sure you are using multi-factor authentication, by making sure your cloud environment is configured properly and there's no misconfiguration. So you have that. And also please always use list privilege in the cloud. Not everybody needs to be a global admin. Not everybody needs to have access to all of your areas of your cloud environment. And the third one, again, feel like a dead horse here. It's gonna be always gonna be about training your staff, right? So you want to conduct security awareness training. Ideally, we like to see it done like quarterly. But we do have some clients that do it monthly, making sure that there are phishing awareness campaigns that happening, the proper use of password and password management, making sure that you have a safe remote working practices to minimize those risks because your employees, they're going to be your first line of defense. So, which means they have to be educated. They have to be educated because they have the key to let somebody in, right? And you want to create a culture for your staff to be able to report risks very easily, right? And then when they do something right, when they do demonstrate good behavior, you want to have some sort of reward process in place where you can acknowledge them because at the end of the day, they are going to be your first line of defense. It could potentially be your biggest threat. Again, this one's talk about identity and access management. You want to implement role-based access, meaning that if your paralegal doesn't need access to a sensitive case file, then you just give them access to exactly what they need to conduct the whatever they need to conduct, right? As I mentioned before, this is going to be based on the different roles and responsibility of your firm to determine who has access to what and how long should they have that access for. Again, always implement multi-factor authentication, including for administrative accounts. And as well for administrative accounts, what we would like to see is what we call having a PAM solution in place where the admins have to request permission or have to put some sort of justification in place on why they need to access the admin account to begin with. So an admin account should not be the same account that you use for your daily activities. So we do a lot of assessments where we see our potential customers will use the global admin that attached to an email address. There you go. You already give half of your information. So now, as a global admin, somebody can have the key to your kingdom, but they already know the username. The only thing that they need to guess is your password, right? And if you're not following best practices of having multi-factor authentication enabled, then you can set yourself for failures. And sometimes when they get access to your system, they can either take the cookies of your browser and your token sessions, where they can log in as you, bypassing MFA. So it's always good to have that second layer, having those privileged accounts managed properly. And the fifth of this plan, you always want to make sure you have a way to monitor your environments. You want to have sensors. So if I use this analogy, think about your home, right? You have an alarm system. The alarm system have sensors. You have sensors at your doors. You have sensors on your windows. You have motion sensors throughout the house. It's the same thing that you want to do for your cybersecurity environment. You want to be able to have a tools that can centralize all the different logs, all the different things that happens in real time, and then alert on specific threats that maybe some could be a potential problem. As I mentioned, you always want to have an incident response in place and to develop clear roles and responsibility. And you always want to test your plan, right? Don't wait until something happened for you to put your incident response plan at test. So you want to do tabletop exercises. If this happened, how we're gonna run, what system that goes offline first, how do we recover, and all that should be defined in your incident response plan. And as well, you always want to be able to have what we call a disaster recovery plan. Make sure all your systems are being backed up regularly. In the event of something happen, you know, uh, perfect example, when COVID happened, because we were being proactive, we were able to get all of our clients be able to work remotely for not having to go into the business because they had what we call a disaster recovery plan in place where the business could shift from one environment to another environment very easily with very minimal downtime. And same thing happens if you get a ransomware. You want to be able to recover from that ransomware very quickly. You want to make sure that all your data are being backed up and quarterly. And again, always have a plan in place, always have a communication plan in place, have it pre-drafted. So in the event something's happen, you want to have a message that goes out to your clients, that goes out to your employees, and also that goes out to regulators, especially if a breach happened, then if it meets the threshold to be reported, then you want to have a plan for that as well. Part of your plan, as I mentioned, you want to make sure that your third-party vendors, your IT support staff, your contractors, your outsourced IT department, your cybersecurity firm, you want to make sure you have a clear understanding how to manage those relationships, right? You want to make sure that they have the proper processes of proper cybersecurity controls in place to make sure that you are being protected. And always, always the best way to manage third-party relationships, I'm pretty sure you all know as lawyers, is through agreements. Make sure your vendors have signed a cybersecurity agreement if they have access to your sensitive information, knowing that they're doing the best practices to make sure that information is protected. And you want to monitor them ongoingly. You want to have regular meetings with them, at least quarterly, to see if anything has changed and that they are keeping up with your best interests at heart by making sure that they are following security best practices. Oh, give me 1 second. I need some water. All right, so the next thing, so you have done all these things, right? So now, how do you have some sort of metrics to measure what you're doing? So let's talk about the KPIs, right? So you want to make sure that you have a way you know the success rates of any phishing campaigns that you're running to see what employees that need additional training. You want to see how many numbers of threats that were detected and blocked, and if some of them were not blocked, why not? And you want to check to see if there are any false positives as well, so you can tweak your detection protocols. And as well, one of the most important things, you want to know the time to detection. So when a threat happens, we've seen a lot of times a threat actor could be in your systems for months without you knowing, especially when it comes to a business email compromise. They'll be there for months watching everything that you're doing. When the right times comes, they see you're working with this vendor, you usually pay them on a particular form or you use some sort of invoice, and then they use that information against you to redirect that payment. So uh, mean times to detect and also mean times to response is one of the crucial metrics that you want to also manage. And you want to conduct biannual reviews of your security programs. You want to make sure that your technology needs or policies are up to date to address emerging threats. Now, if I had a very simple way to say what a law firm cybersecurity framework would look like. So I break it down into four components. Okay. The four components is very simple. As I mentioned, again, cybersecurity is not difficult if you know what to do and how to do it. All right. The first one we talk about is going to be your human security. Human security is always constantly thinking about how somebody can get in through phishing emails. You want to monitor your the dark web behaviors to see if your information actually out in the dark web. You want to conduct security awareness training, and this is really to keep your first line of defense very strong. All right. And then the second piece is your risk gap. So you want to do security gap analysis. You want to make sure you have different controls in place. Again, cybersecurity is very proactive, so you have to take a multi-layer approach when it comes to cybersecurity, all the way from the network layer to your data layer and everything in between, right? You want to make sure that is you have those things in place to reduce your gaps. The third piece that you want to think about is compliance. Compliance is everything you have done. You have to have a way to document all of your different tools, all the different tools that you have in your environment, all the different controls that you are doing. You have to be able to demonstrate that you have reasonable security in place. So that's where the compliance comes in, is having the proper security policies, is having the proper processes, is having the proper documentation, is having the proper report that says in the event that you have some sort of a cyber incident that says here's what we have been doing. We are not being negligent, but that's just we cannot prevent everything from happening in our environment, but we were doing our best. So you want to be able to have a way to demonstrate compliance, and that would be the next one. Last but not least, when everything else is failed, right? You have done everything you can possibly do. Your staffs are trained. You have proper security controls in place. You have done your assessments. You have done everything that you can do. Somehow, a hacker still manage to get into your system. That's when your last resort would be to have a cybersecurity policy in place. When everything else fails, you want to have a policy in place that can help you recover from that. And with that, that is what I call a full risk management program based on this framework that covers every aspect part of your security. So now, remember, threats are coming every day, especially with the use of AI. Now, everybody speaks or write perfect English, right? So you have to have tools in place to prevent it. The same way law firms are using AI to be more productive, to do a lot of stuff. It's the same way cyber criminals are leveraging AI to be more productive, to be more convincing, to trick people from clicking on malicious links, right? And also talking about AI, some of the risks that we see, make sure if you are uploading sensitive information to any AI platform that it's a private AI, it's not a public AI, because a lot of times the AI models will use that information to train the the algorithm. So you want to make sure that you're not causing a data breach by uploading your sensitive files to an AI platform, right? So we'll be doing a training on AI in the next couple of months, but this would be what true risk management looks like when it comes to cybersecurity. Four key pillars: human security, cybersecurity, compliance, and cyber liability insurance. Now, I know I covered a lot. There's a lot to be done. And let's say you say, hey, this is too much for me. I don't think I have everything that I need, and you would like to partner with us to help you manage those risks. And I have an offer here for the first 10 clients. We'll not only do a free risk strategy session with you, we'll do a free risk assessment. If we found any vulnerabilities, we'll cover the remediation costs, and we'll have a no onboarding fee, and we'll give you your first month free of charge. This is 100% risk-free to try our services to show you what we can do to help you protect your firm so you can focus on practicing law versus being an IT professional, cybersecurity professional. At the lower end, this is $8,700 offer, but we're offering it for free to you as a part of your Georgia State Bar membership. With that said, I know I covered a lot today. This will be my presentation. And if you do need to book an assessment with us, I have a QR code or a page where you can go to sign up. And then now I will open the floor for some Q&A.
Thank you, Wilson. That was incredibly helpful. A lot of really great information that was shared. We did have some people who posted questions as we were going in the chat, so I will read those. And if there are additional questions, if you'll either raise your hand or put it in the chat, we will make time to answer as many of those as we can. Does that work with you, Wilson?
Yes.
Yep. And I also just want to know, I know a lot of people are dropping their name in the chat. Again, you just need to do that if, for example, you're showing up as iPhone or no name at all. Otherwise, when you registered, you should have put that information there and we'll be able to cross-reference that. So please don't feel the urgency or need to drop your name in the chat or your bar number. We'll be able to manage all of that on our end. All right, so Wilson, the first question that I saw in the chat, I think you were talking about the different things people need to have, was one, if you have some links or suggestions on good external hard drive. Do you have any recommendations, any things that come top of mind?
Well, they have a lot of vendors out there. It will come to you for you to do the research because as a part of our risk management, we don't have a specific vendor that we work with. Some vendors have their own, but that is something that we don't usually recommend on a specific vendor for this type of things. It's just something that you'd have to do your own research based on your specific needs. Now, we do have our vendors that we work with, but it goes through when you become a client, we have those vendors. But publicly, we really try to stay away from mentioning any vendors because there's so many out there you can choose from. It requires a little bit of homework to do so.
All right, so your suggestion would be that they do a good search for the best external hard drives based on their needs, or what would your
That's correct. Yes.
perfect?
when you work with us, we understand your needs and we can make those recommendations. Without understanding the needs that you have to know the type of information that you need, the encryption level, the size of the hard drive, how long, where's that hard drive is going to be, what type of connections, what type of operating system it's going to be on, if it's a Mac, if it's a Windows, it's very hard for us to give you any recommendations. So.
All right. Well, that's also helpful to just have people cue into what things they need to be thinking about when they're looking for a hard drive. This may be the same, but the question was if you recommend a popular app or company for, it says AI-based spam blockers. I also, I don't know if you have any recommendations on what people should be looking for if they're looking for spam blockers.
Yeah, so you definitely want to look for a company that have a good reputation on, have a good track records on making sure that they have minimal, what we call false positives. A lot of times there are companies out there, good emails are going to spam, and then bad emails are getting into the mailbox. Again, this is something that it's going to require a little bit of homework on your side to kind of do like reviews on the potential vendors out there in order to help you mitigate those risks. I have to be very careful here when I do these webinars is mention specific names. Or I remember I did a webinar for another organization. It was like, well, this is what you tell me to do, but this company was involved in a breach, but I didn't mention the name of the company. I said somebody like such company, and a participant says, hey, but this company was involved in a breach. So ever since I try not to mention specific names without doing a particular assessment so we can understand your environment and give you specific recommendations, because without understanding your environment, it's very hard for us to make any specific recommendations. We can't prescribe something that we haven't diagnosed, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. I think lawyers can appreciate that too. It's very much like that. Without knowing the specifics of your case, I can't say X, Y, and Z. So we respect that. Next question. For those of us who are new to cybersecurity, can you please provide examples of what multi-factor authentication is or might look like?
Excellent questions. I love this question. So multi-factor authentication is a concept of three things: something you are, something you have, something you know. So something you are could be your fingerprints or your facial recognition. And something you know could be a password or a passphrase. Something you have could be your cell phone, where you get a text message or have a token where you can enter into the system that challenge you for a multi-factor. Now, it's very crucial. Sometimes people may think they're doing multi-factor authentication, but in reality, they're doing single-factor authentication. So so for example, if I say something you have, it could be your phone. So if the concept is you entering your email address, right? And then you enter in a password, then you have a passphrase that you know that as a challenge, it's still something you know. So that's still a single factor. Multi-factor means you have to be able to use the 2 out of 3 that I mentioned, something you know, which is a password or a key phrase, something you have, which is a code from your phone, so that would consider a multi-factor, or something you are, which could be your biometrics, fingerprints of that nature. I hope that clarifies it.
Yes, thank you. That was a great response. I love the way you broke that down into the three different categories there so that we can be clear that we're using multi-factor and not the same, just multiple of the same factor.
Right.
The next question that I have here is, what does a bring your own device policy look like? And I really want to dive in here as much as you can with us, Wilson, because the little Spidey in me was like, I don't, a bring your own device sounds like it could become a nightmare. So what would that policy look like? Or maybe give us a little there about that, please.
Yeah, this is a great question also. So bring your own device policy, meaning that you have a policy in place that one example that I can give you, if you bring your own device, you are not allowed to download company information to your own device. That company information should only stays on corporate asset, right? But also it dictates that your device that you're using have some level of security as well. Your policy can include things of, okay, you have to have anti-malware software on your policy and on your device. You have to have some level of security, and also the policy should dictate of what you can do and cannot do on the device as well. And a lot of times, with those policy, you can create policy that you can enforce, where you can have what we call the device actually segmented. I know Microsoft is very big on that. So a majority of our clients use Microsoft Office 365, meaning that you can get your emails, you can have Teams, you can have all the different tools, collaboration tools that you need to collaborate internally, but you can only collaborate within that platform. So for example, if you're trying to copy something from your emails down to your local device, if you have the policy that enforced that action is should not be taking place, and the system would automatically reject it, telling you your organization does not allow you to copy data to your local device. And that is one of the best way that I can describe it. So the policy that you are doing, all the policies, make sure they have some way you can enforce them, either through technology, right?
I love that. I think that's a really big, important point for many of us who have distributed teams or work remotely or building these virtual first law practices, because people may be on their own devices and our phones are very powerful devices. So really thinking about what that policy is for your staff and your team around what they can do with their phone, which is likely going to be their own personal device unless you're providing those for them, and making sure that that segmentation is there.
Right. Again, there are ways for users to work from securely from their own device, especially in this hybrid environment. Like I said, we have vendors that make significant investment in that area to making sure that um, you know people can have what we call a virtual or a hybrid workplace or a fully remote workplace as well.
Wonderful. This one I also want to know, do you have a checklist of all of these different types of policies that you are recommending?
Yes, not only we have a checklist for all these different policies, we actually built them for our clients. So that could be, I have some templates of all different policies that I can share with you all after the call, if that's something you like.
All right, fantastic. And this is the last question that I have found in the chat. So if you have a question, I don't know, Kim, if you can see if there are raised hands. I can't see everyone at this moment. But the last question that I have are there signs or ways to discover that a hacker has access to your system and is laying in wait?
Yes, an assessment. So, yeah, security assessment is going to be the key. All right. So, once you identify, because what the assessment will do, it'll pull up all the different logs for how long it will look at the different ports that are exposed. And then based on those different components, then we can kind of go back and see, okay, uh, has this particular vulnerability has been exploited, right? That's a part of the risk. So once you do the risk assessment, you'll find all the different gaps. Now you go to each and every one of the gaps to kind of determine if that gap has been exploited. So the way to do it is having a risk assessment, and also you want to that's the only way you can identify it. And then other ways you have to check your behaviors, right? You always, especially with emails, you want to always check your send folder to see if you are sending emails, if you are the one who's sending those emails out. That could be other ways to determine. You have to determine, see what behaviors that happening in your environment, but ultimately, the best way to know if somebody's is within your environment is by conducting a risk assessment that will show all the different gaps that you have, and then we can reverse engineer these gaps to kind of figure out if somebody actually, in fact, if you are compromised.
All right. That is incredibly helpful. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Oh, I got one. Are there any good practices when it comes to having clients submit information to your firm through online forms? Or should this be avoided entirely? Ooh, this is a good question.
Yes. So you always want to use a secure portal. You want to use a trusted, secure portal to make sure clients can send you information securely. Right? Not through not via email. Email is not secured, even though you have the ability to encrypt emails, but emails is just not a secure method of communication. So you want to have a system in place where they can securely upload the files. I know some um, case management solution provide such portal to use, but yes, it's going to be through a secure portal. Not that would be the best way.
Thank you. Well, I want you to say that thing again about email. I want you to say it again. I think email is probably the most dangerous thing that we as attorneys engage with every single day, unwittingly, without thinking about it. So if you would just make that point again about the security of email and the not so subtle, I'm going to make the very big push for using client portals and case management, but please, again, just email.
Yeah, so think about it. The email server lives somewhere else, right? So when you send an email, it goes to a server, then it gets to its destination. The copy of that email still remains on that server. So let's say whoever's hosting that server somewhere got some malicious attack that happened, or they got subpoenaed to release the hard drive of that server. Now you can see where the threats are, right? Even from what you already mentioned, it's just email is, and the minute that you send out an email, there's nothing that can prevent somebody else from forwarding that email to somebody else. There's nothing can prevent, so the chain of communication of email is just, the risk just multiplied very rapidly. So that's why it's not a secure way to send sensitive information. There's a lot of things. Email servers get hacked all the times. They may be subpoenaed by regulators. It's just not the best way. So yeah. I don't know what else to say. It's just emails yeah. Emails is a good way of communicating, but not sensitive information.
Perfect. Thank you. I have another question here. What are your thoughts about using websites like www.haveibeenpwned.com for seeing if your email addresses are on the dark web?
Absolutely. I would say every person should do that at least once a month. It's a free website, right? You always want to know, because once you know, hey, our website has been compromised or our email address has been compromised, then it should trigger you for you to reset your password, right? It should trigger you also some of the things that we didn't cover. You never want to reuse your passwords. Never want to reuse your password more than once, right? We only had an hour and a half, so some of the things that I didn't mention, but yes. So any tools that you can use to educate yourself on knowing what the threat actors knows about you, it's a good tool. So yes, so we have a program where we proactively manage that for you. But yes, if you do have the time, that's a great resource where you can always check. Obviously, it's a free resource, which means the level of investments in technology to give you the proper data that you need, that level of investment may not be there. So something is always better than nothing, but I always, you will get more when you pay for something versus when you get it for free. It's a great resource, but it may not be reliable. But something is better than nothing.
Well, great points. What would you recommend, if anything, to prevent your email from being sent without your permission?
To prevent your emails to be sent without your permission.
Correct.
Okay, so the number one thing is multi-factor authentication to make sure that people can't get access to your email account easily. All right, so that's the first thing. Second is have a filtering solution in place to filter what goes in and what goes out. So a lot of times if you have a business email compromise, uh, threat actors will try to send malicious emails on your behalf, right? If you have some sort of solution that filters those emails and then that can detect a malicious emails that's coming out from your environment, that will alert you. That will create some flags for you as well. But best answer would be always have a multi-factor authentication in place and make sure you have a proper email filtering solution, not only filtering internal emails or inbound emails, but also filtering outbound emails as well.
And on that, Wilson, are there ways, like let's say I send a message to a client and I don't want my client to be able to forward that email? Are there ways to prevent that? And if not, what would you recommend people do instead?
Yes, great question. Yes, there are ways to prevent that. That actually built in. This is what I talk about when we talk about having a paid solution versus a free solution, right? That's a solution Office 365 offer. With a single click, I can pretty much send an email. Only the attended person will see that email and nobody else. If they forward it out to somebody else, it doesn't matter. You can encrypt your emails, and that's in that way where you create policies. That email cannot be printed, cannot be forwarded, or cannot be edited or anything like that. So yes, there are tools in there, and that's a part of the Microsoft Office 365 suite.
All right, well, I know some of you may have to jump, but we did promise you 1.5 credits, and so I have to go all the way to 130 to make sure that I can, with integrity, give you that 0.5. And so, Wilson, if there were any things that you could, for the person who is just getting started, they listen to the training, they're like, this is a lot, and maybe they don't have the resources yet to delegate that, outsource that, hire yourself or others. What few things would you say that they could get started with doing today to improve their level of cybersecurity?
Yes. So a few things they can do is number one is having a good antivirus or what we call EDR solution in place to kind of like some vendors out there are really inexpensive that they can go with. Again, I'm not gonna name any names, but an EDR solution is a good way to start. Second thing would be obviously having a good email service provider, not just your particular Gmail account, because again, you can't really monitor those things. And yeah, it's gonna require a little bit of work because getting those things in place, you have to be able to configure them as well, right? And we have platforms that where you can train yourself on cybersecurity. It doesn't have to be doesn't have to be through a service provider, but there are platforms out there that you can use where you can learn about the threats out there. So again, email filtering, endpoint protection, good firewalls would be a good way to start. Okay, and have a process to document what you're doing. Okay, again, I don't want to give a false sense of security as well. You always have to think about, okay, um, in the event something happened to my firm, how can I justify the action that I've taken so far, right? That's what it's gonna come down to. It could be, hey, because I just started, we don't have the resources to have this in-house, but here's what I'm doing, right? Here are some of the low-hanging fruits that I'm doing. So I make sure I have a proper uh, uh, endpoint protection in place on my phones, on my work devices, and I make sure that I have a good firewall, and I make sure that all these things that I'm doing, it's been updated. The whole thing is just that when you have these things, because cybersecurity is proactive, now you have the firewall, you have to make sure it's up to date. You have the EDR solution, the endpoint detection and response solution. You have to make sure these are being updated constantly because the threats are changing so often, right? So those are some of the things. And then whatever you're doing, yeah, I don't care if it's on a spreadsheet or somewhere, just document this is what I'm doing so far, right? And then it'll play big in the event something happens, say, hey, because of my size, here's the justification, here's the reasonable action that I have taken based on the size of our firm. But at the same time, without knowing everything in the firms, I wouldn't be able to tell you what are those reasonable things are. You want mute?
I had a few fantastic. It's not a Zoom meeting unless someone is talking on mute. I had two other questions that came up, so maybe we'll go lightning right to the 1:30 mark. So we have 6 minutes. How important is it to be using a VPN?
It's crucial. It is very crucial. I mentioned that nowadays VPN doesn't work the way it should because VPNs are flat networks. But what VPN is being replaced by is a solution called SASE, right? It's a secure edge gateway. And what happened is actually regardless where you at, you are on your own internal network. So for example, if you're traveling you're at a Starbucks, right? Once you have a SASE solution in your system, whoever's on the public network cannot see your traffic. You're at a hotel, you're on vacation, you're in a different country. So by having a SASE solution is always on, and that actually shelter you or create that secure tunnel where your information is safe. It's the same as a VPN. The only difference is a VPN is a flat network, meaning that once you have access, if the VPN is not configured properly with different segmentations, anybody have access to everything in your environment, right? So yes, a VPN is good. Something is better than nothing, but I would say have a trusted SASE solution that you can trust. A lot of times you may say, okay, you have a VPN, like a third-party VPN solution out there. That traffic is going somewhere. Do you know exactly where that traffic is going, right? So do you understand that once the traffic leaves your environment or your information you're exchanging leave your environment, it goes through someone else's server to get to its destination. That's the tunnel. That's the VPN tunnel, right? That removes it from the public internet, right? So you always want to understand um, the reputation of that VPN service provider, right? Or that private VPN service provider to make sure it's aligned with your standard and also your regulatory mandate. But great question. It is something is better than nothing. Obviously, yes, VPN would be a good solution, but if it was up to me, a SASE solution would be the best way to go.
And where can people find a SASE solution? You can Google that the same way you would Google and search for a VPN?
Yep.
All right. And are there criteria? I know you're not going to give us any recommendations. I know you're not going to drop any names, but are there criteria, things that you would say you should look for these type of characteristics, traits, factors when you're searching for a VPN or a SASE product?
Yes. So you want to understand the company history. You want to understand that where they are based, because a lot of these vendors, they may be based out in other different countries, right? So where your data may be leaving the US jurisdiction. So you also want to make sure that what they are doing. Are they doing malware scanning on that information? Are they just encrypting that information, or are they doing what we call SSL decryption, where they actually decrypting that information to see what's in it? So you want to make sure you understand the company, the reputation, and the level of different protections that they have in place, right? I think that would be a good thing for me to write a guide on.
Yeah,
I'll be more than happy to write a guide and show you what a good SASE solution should look like and send that over to you all.
we would love that. Much appreciated. And I know I've got 2 minutes, so I did see a couple of questions. I've seen people say, please do in the comments. They love that. They want that. I had a couple of questions that came up around what considerations we should have around our phones. What do we need to know about how our phones could be at risk? What additional precautions do we need to take with our phones? And even maybe some other ancillary devices like printers, if we're trying to dispose of them and they have information on the hard drive. And then virtual desktop, if we want to have contractors who are able to use them. Like, what are some precautions, resources, et cetera, that might be useful for people to know or think about with those?
Yes, great question. So with your phones, have a way to remote wipe your phones because it's a tiny little device. Perfect example. Yesterday I went to see a client. I was in a rush. I put my phone down and I left the office. And I didn't realize that until I was 30 minutes within my commute, right? With a single click of a button, I was able on my laptop, I was able to lock that phone permanently until I can get back to it. So you want to have a way, if any device that you're using for business related purposes, you want to have a way where you can control it in the event that it's no longer in your possession. So having what we call a device management solution in place would be would be my recommendation here.
Fantastic. And I think that I remember working in a big law firm and like they have the ability to get into my phone if I did something with my phone and lost it, they could lock it or wipe it. And so that's something maybe even to think about with your team members, however you're building your team.
Yeah. And
One
again,
of
All
Go ahead.
these solutions are available, and you'll be surprised. What I would encourage anyone to do if they have these questions, what I would suggest is really it's a free assessment. It's a free discovery call. It's a free strategy session. If you get on a call with me and I review your technology stack, I'll be able to give you some one-to-one guidance better because as a part of that process, we'll have an NDA in place and you'll have more control over what I can tell you versus what I'm telling you now, if that makes sense, right? So once we have some sort of agreement where I can say, okay, here's what I can tell you versus what I cannot tell you, it'll make it a whole lot easier. But if you truly want to understand the risk that you have, it's a free assessment. It's a free resource. It's things that I charge thousands and thousands of dollars for, but because of the membership and I with the state bar, I made that available to you all. So anything that you can think about, that's what I would recommend, really. And then my team and I, we can dive deeper into some of the recommendations that we make. Yeah, it's zero obligation if you want to use our services or not, but just be able to give you the guidance that you need and for you to make a proper decision.
Wonderful. Well, we are right at 1:31, so we made it to get you your 1.5. Thank you, Wilson, so much for giving your time and your talent today. This was very informative. I myself took away a number of nuggets that I am going to put in place and raise up the ranks in all the places that I am. So we really appreciate this. Again, I am very grateful that you are offering this free discovery call so people can get some structured support around where they can go, what the next best step they can take. Lawyers, members of the bar, just want to remind you that cybersecurity issues are on the rise and lawyers tend to be low-hanging fruit, which is why we are so committed to making sure that we have these resources and we have ongoing communication with you around ways that you can make sure that you are protecting yourself, your license, your clients, and your modern law practice. So again, thank you, Wilson. Thank you to my team members over here at the Law Practice Management Program. I do want to let all of you know who are still here that we are hosting a one-day summit. The Take Charge Summit will happen Friday, April 25th here at the Bar Center, and we are focusing on streamlining your law practice and really making sure that you have the tools and resources in place to continue to do what you're best at doing, which is running your law practice. Thank you so much for your time. Again, if you filled out the registration and you're here the whole time, we'll be able to move all that information right over to where it needs to go to get you your credit. Thank you, Kim, for putting this up there so that you can see. We do have a newsletter. You can get to it with the link below. It's a bit.ly link with LPM newsletter. And that is where we share every month tips, tools, and tactics to help you continue to grow your law practice. So if you are not already in and subscribed, I encourage you to do that. Wilson, we will definitely be following up with you about the guide and some of the other things that you have mentioned so that we can just make that available. Again, thank you all for your participation, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Take care.